Hey guys, today we're going to be talking about bleaches or lighteners and the decolorization process. So here we go. Lighteners, the decolorizing process by me, Ms. Vonnie. The hair strand. Here's a picture of the hair strand and you see the different parts of the hair strand. And this is actually in the Milady's textbook, chapter 21. There's three parts to the hair strand. You got the cuticle, the cortex, and the medulla. The cuticle is actually the outer scales of the hair. And so you could think of it as an example. Let's see, if you're standing in the middle of a circle and everyone who's circling around you, they're all joined hands and they come in to hug you and they're like covering you and protecting you. That's the function of the cuticle. So they're scales and they're translucent and they reflect. And so when the sun hits, you can see the reflection of the color that's actually in the core of the hair. So they protect the core of the hair, which is called the cortex. And the scales actually make up 20% of the hair strength. The cortex is the core of the hair, which makes up 80% of the hair's strength and elasticity. And that is where you'll find your pigment, meaning your natural hair color, which is also known as melanin. And they're little granules of color. Now there's actually two types of melanin. One is called eumelanin and the other is called pheomelanin. The pheomelanin is where you get the reds and the blondes and I said reds and blondes. So like your ginger color, that would be from the pheomelanin. And then the eumelanin is the black hair and the dark brown hair. Anyway, this is very important to know because the cortex determines how weak or strong that hair is. And the lighter you go, the weaker your cortex becomes. The medulla, unfortunately, in your text, it just tells you where it's located and it does not really tell much about the function of what it does. You will find it in coarse hair, such as beard hair. You will not find it in blonde hair or very fine hair. So there's no real explanation as to what the purpose is. So I forgot to mention here, when lightener is mixed with hydrogen peroxide and then you apply it to the hair, it does a process what's called fragmenting. And I actually learned that term in a Redken class. So when I looked up fragmenting, it means to break into pieces. And so that's what's happening once you mix that lightener with the developer and place it on the hair. You can envision like you just stuck a stick of dynamite into that person's hair and it explodes and all these pigment granules are blowing up everywhere. And then they continue to blow up. Now what you as the stylist are seeing is the hair going through the stages of the lightening. So you start seeing it turn red brown or red orange, and then it gets to orange and then yellow orange. So you're visually seeing this change happen, but this is what's happening internally, the process fragmenting. When you rinse the hair, this is meaning that you've decided to stop the lightening process. And so you want to make sure that you rinse it in cool water. I don't know why it says, when you don't rinse it in cool water, not cold water, because a lot of times when I've told students cool water, they thought it meant like bone chilling cold water. That's not the case. It's just slightly past the warm. So your cool water is what stops the bleach or lightener from processing. Now, if you don't do this, they will go home, and that means even if you put a toner on their hair can continue to lighten to the point where the cuticles are all blown open. So that means that toner is going to rinse out faster. until the point where their hair starts to break off. So there's a level chart here. Usually the level chart goes from 1 to 10, 1 being black, but in your text it says natural black. And if I didn't mention this, I'm going to mention it now. This is coming from your Milady's textbook. If you're in school studying to be a cosmetologist, or you haven't gone to State Board yet and you're studying for your test, this is coming out of chapter 21 in the Milady's textbook. So 1 is black, but in the text it says natural black. And then 10 being the lightest blonde, or as your textbook says, natural lightest blonde. So in between these levels is 2 to 9, and that's where you see dark brown, medium brown, dark blonde, and then to your palest blonde. So during the decolorization process, under the natural colors, you'll see what's called undertones, meaning that once it leaves the black and goes into brown, well, what you may see under the brown is the red brown. And so that is called an undertone. And why is it important to know this? Because when you're picking out toners, you want to make sure that it's not just visually what you see on top of the hair, but when you run your fingers through it, what's popping up from underneath, so that you have an all even tone, if you even have to use toner. So you begin to see dark red brown to red orange to orange gold, yellow gold, and pale yellow. And I just told you why it's important to know, but this will help you with your toners if you use any. So things you need to know about bleach before you're applying it. Just because someone comes to you and says they want highlights doesn't mean that it should or could be done. You want to know the texture of their hair. Is it fine? Is it medium, or is it coarse? You want to know the porosity. That means the hair's ability to absorb any water or moisture. Do they have any previous color on their hair? So did they color it themselves and it's from Walmart, or it's from CVS? Even the 99-cent store, I think, sells hair color now. Do they have henna on their hair? Do they have sun-in? And why do these things matter? Well, I can tell you from experience, these colors, especially henna and box color, contain metallics in it. So what that means is when you mix it with the professional lightener and developer, you may see smoke, green smoke. I've seen that. Or where the foils blow up really big, and when you open it, the smoke comes out. It's a toxic smoke. And at that point, that means the hair is cooking because the metals are reacting, and that means quickly after or shortly after, the hair is going to start dissolving off. Sun-in is another thing that you would get from the drugstore. You can spray it in the hair and it lightens the hair, and these are things you don't want to mix. Relaxer using sodium hydroxide. When someone has a perm on their hair, I do not recommend highlights, because that's like a double whammy to the hair. It's already dry, but sodium hydroxide is one of the most strongest chemicals as a stylist that you would work with, and you should not put bleach on relaxed hair. It will melt it off. Now, I didn't say someone with relaxer on their hair can't get highlights. I just don't recommend you putting lightener or bleach on it. You could use what's called a high lift tint, and that will give them like golden blonde highlights depending on which high lift tint you used. And it goes back to the texture of their hair, the porosity, the elasticity of their hair with the relaxer on it. Can they even handle that? Because with a high lift tint, you use a 40 volume developer, which is quite strong anyway. Permanent waves, Brazilian blowouts, keratin treatments, and everybody has their own opinion on this. I'm really concerned about one's hair as far as it having its integrity and not breaking off. So I don't recommend these things. But if you are working in the salon and you're wondering, should you do it? I would say try a test strand. So remember, I talked about this in other videos of mine, especially with hair color, preliminary strand test. So you would take a piece of their hair in the back just in case anything happens, and you would apply the bleach and lightener, and developer, place it in the foil, check it, and if it still has its integrity, then go for it. Maybe consider doing what I just said before you do highlights or balayaging. And another thing you want to know is the hair curly. Bleach can change a client's curl pattern. And so these are things that you want to educate your client about. And if they're okay with losing some of their curl pattern, then that's up to you if you want to do it. There's two types of bleach and lightener or lightener. There's on the scalp lighteners. Usually they're oil based. And all that means, guys, is if you get some on the scalp, it should not burn it, blister it, or any of that. Now, that doesn't mean that someone may not itch or have a reaction to it. It's just a little milder, and it is slower to lighten. So that's, if you're just getting started with lightening hair, maybe you want to work with this first. It's usually thicker, has thickeners in it, has conditioning agents, so it won't be dripping and running and bleeding all over the place, and that's a good thing. Off the scalp lighteners are usually known as quick lighteners. These lighteners are usually a powder lightener. They're strong, and it depends on what developer you're using with it, but I have seen personally busted open scalp, red, just to the touch, very painful blisters where the hair was literally coming out of the head. So I've seen that. It contains the ingredient persulfate salts, and that's to make it quicker and a stronger lightener. Things to keep in mind when you're using lightener or bleach. This isn't a service that you would walk away from when you have applied it to the hair. So this isn't something that you would just slap foils in and say, okay, bye, I'm going to lunch and I'll see you in about 45 minutes, okay? No, we don't do those things because depending, remember, on the texture of their hair, what they already have on their hair, it could take off just like that, or it could take a long time. Usually when something's not taking in 45 minutes, I would say the dryer would be your last resort. Because once you put that under the dryer, yes, the heat speeds up the process, but it also makes the lightener watery. So what that means is if you have it in foil packets, it's going to get runny and start bleeding on places you don't want it to be on. So last thing that's very important with this is be mindful of your mixing ratio. So read the directions. Usually a lightener will say 1 to 2, meaning 1 scoop of lightener to 2 ounces of developer, and it will be the perfect consistency. Now, I was taught to just freehand the developer and mix and mix and mix until the lightener was creamy. It wasn't until I started taking Redken classes that I learned how important it is to really follow what the ratio is, because the developer, the more you place in there, if you don't follow that ratio, you're actually weakening your lightener and watering it down. So what that means for you is it's going to take forever to get to where you're wanting it to be, and it most likely will only live to an orange, which means you'll have to use a toner, and she or he may not be happy because it didn't get as light as they wanted it to be, and that's why, because you weren't mindful of following the directions for the mixture. So in conclusion, lightener or bleach, I like to say lightener, that's the more professional term, but unfortunately in the text it says bleach, so that's where the conflict comes in, because they tell you one thing as far as lightener is the professional term, but then they continuously say bleach. So I would leave that up to you if you want to use that term. When someone's coming to you for the first time and they say, I want to be this color and I want to be lighter, oh, okay, let me bleach your hair, as opposed to, okay, well, what we're going to have to do is lighten it a couple of levels. You decide what sounds best to you. All I want to tell you is that this is one of the strongest chemicals that you'll ever work with, aside from sodium hydroxide. And some people may not agree with this, but it is because you are placing a stick of dynamite in the core of their hair. That is the strength of their hair. And the lighter something is, the weaker it is. So just think of the pigment in your skin. There's a thing called albinism, and albinos cannot be out in the sun for long without getting third-degree burns if they're not protected. And it's the same thing in your hair. The lighter blonde that your hair is, the weaker it has become, because that melanin is no longer there to give the core of the hair its strength. So what that means for us as stylists is we need to put our clients on a home regimen, a home care regimen, where they can really be sure that they're giving their hair the best care when they're away from you, so they won't experience any breakage, no flat ironing every day, no noodle filling hair, you know. And that's the thing, at the end of the day, we want to retain our clients. We don't want them to just be a one-time thing and then we never see them again. Retention, retention, retention is very important. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching my videos. Thank you for your support. God bless you all. And I will see you next time when we talk about how to pick your toners. Bye, guys.